Welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you are joining us for this webinar. We will begin in just a moment. I am here with my dear friend, Josh Hayden, who we'll hear from throughout the webinar, and I'm so excited about this webinar. So welcome. We see individuals continuing to come in, and we will look forward to a great webinar. So good to see those who are logging in. It's great. It's great to have a beautiful Wednesday morning where I am. It looks like it's a beautiful Wednesday morning where you are, Josh. And
yeah, it's wonderful.
I'd love to ask those who are joining us to maybe shoot us a chat to let us know where you're calling in from. That will help us to better build some relationships today so that we can follow up with you. So feel free to chat in where you're where you're coming from. We'd love to know a little bit about that. Also, Josh, I'd like to begin asking participants if they would send in our chat just a little bit of fun fact about their lives. The one fun fact I'd love to ask is how long you have been serving in your present ministry position. So those of you who are already online, while we're waiting on others to join us, if you could take a moment, I'd love to know. I'd love for Josh and I and others to see how long you've been serving in your present ministry position. So feel free to chat that in. I'd love to see how long some of you have been in your present leadership position, be it a senior pastor, staff member, or even a volunteer, lay leader in your church. We'd love to know that about you. Josh, you've been serving at First Baptist for 10 years. That's incredible.
That's right.
You must have started when you were 12.
How did you know?
So we're still waiting on some to come in. So thank you for joining us. We'll begin in about 2 minutes. So I am very glad to see how many we have participating. This is an exciting day. Glad to have you in this very unique space with church and seminary. It is a wonderful partnership, and we're glad that God has this designed for us. So to our audience, let me just redirect you a bit. For some reason, we're not able to see those chats. So if you could just go to the Q&A and let us know how long you've been serving, that will be very, very helpful. So I'm sorry you may have to redo that. If you could just shoot over to the Q&A and let us know how long you've been serving in your present ministry, that will be great. And I'll tell you what, let's just stay in that Q&A because we'll be asking you to send in some questions to Josh in just a moment. That's the significance of this webinar. This is not simply a presentation. This is actually conversation. And I think we learn best through the conversation that speaks well of our Christian community and our faith community. So great. Yes, thank you all. You're now in the QA. So we're all in the same chat box called the Q&A. So thank you for sending in your years of service in your present ministry. Wow, Josh, can you see this? There are some impressive years of ministry. Wow. That's really good. And I will say, whether it's 1 or whether it's 50, today we want to show a lot of care and respect for your place of ministry. We want you to be encouraged and not just enlightened, but encouraged and inspired to continue faithfully, regardless of your tenure. But it's good to see the length of tenures here. That is very, very exciting. I am glad to see our friend Brian Williams here from the BGAV Field Strategist Office in Tidewater. Brian Williams, it's great to have you here, my friend. And Josh, a former professor of yours, is sitting right here. Dr. Lee, my dear colleague, friend, and academic dean of Leland Seminary. So Dr. Lee, we certainly are glad you're here. And I want to give a shout out to a co-laborer of mine prior to me coming to Leland. That's Scott Shapey. He's associate pastor and pastor of discipleship in Virginia Beach. Scott, is so glad to see you here as well. And all of you, we're so glad you're here. And I think we're close to start time. Josh, you ready to go?
Ready.
Okay, so good morning, webinar participants. Welcome to Leland Seminary and our webinar with Josh Hayden. And the theme Remissioning Church. Let me say that Leland's commitment to be the seminary for the church continues to create spaces like this, so that we're able to have great conversation concerning both the health and the growth of churches just like yours. I am so honored to be here with my trusted colleague and dear friend and author and pastor, Reverend Dr. Josh Hayden. Josh, I'm so glad you're here, and I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for your ministry and for your recent book, Remissioning Church, which is gaining wide acclaim in the U.S. as well as in the U.K. And Josh has been in organizational leadership for over 20 years, 2 decades. He's been 10 years at his present church. And Josh, what I love about this conversation today is I've been inside your ministry. I've sat with you one-on-one. You are practicing what you have proclaimed in remissioning. So we're excited to hear from you. Most of all, if I may say most of all, as a friend, Josh is also a graduate of Leland. So Josh, we're proud of you. We thank God for you. And I am so glad to welcome you into this space that actually belongs to you, my friend. So welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks so much, Ken. So glad to be with you, and Leland with such an incredible opportunity and formation experience for me as a young pastor. I was already serving on part-time staff at a church when I got started, and yeah, my first 11 years of ministry were really shaped through my time at Leland. So really, really grateful for the school and grateful for your leadership, and glad to be here today.
Amen. Amen. Well, we are excited about the topic that is in front of us, remissioning. And so, Josh, if you and I could just have some conversation, some of this will feel familiar to me because you and I have been talking about this for over 3 years as I've met with you and I've learned this amazing vision and practical application that God has allowed you to bring into a lot of churches and into the lives of many pastors. So if I could begin with a few questions, and then participants, be thinking about your questions, because in a moment we'll ask for you to submit questions, because I'm having a brief conversation with Josh, but I'd love for you to be in that conversation as well. So be thinking about your questions. Josh, if we could begin with terminology. Now, in my generation, revitalization was spoken about a lot. And now I'm looking at remissioning, and I realize this may not be the same thing. Can you share the difference between remissioning and other terms like revitalization, revisioning, or restructuring?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ken. The way I talk about remissioning is that it's the process of inside out transformation of the church through discipleship for the sake of the neighbors and world. It's kind of this steady, purposeful, dedicated process that involves the transformation of the leaders and the church together for the sake of their community. And remissioning is actually pretty different than revitalization in the way that I think about it. They're both good and important, but they are different processes. Revitalization is sort of refreshing an existing church to do its current work with more clarity, and usually with an aim of how do we just increase numerical growth. To revitalize is to work harder and smarter and more efficiently on already existing programs and events to help increase the church's relevance to its community. Usually, a church that is revitalizing already has pretty good things going on, but maybe they're starting to drift or they got distracted and they're just trying to refocus a little bit. Um, Remissioning churches are wrestling with the question like, if our people gathered in our building and the building and the people fell into a sinkhole, would our community notice if we're gone? A revitalizing church would ask, like, what can we do to bring more people to our programs and events? Um, Maybe the most helpful way that I tend to think about this is revitalizing a church is like updating an app on your favorite device. Like revitalizing is helping your individual programs to run more smoothly on your phone, use less battery, crash less often, work more efficiently. But remissioning is upgrading the whole operating system so that all the apps, the messaging, the processes, they actually fit into a new system and work in sync with multiple other devices across the world. Remissioning churches are really like asking complicated questions about how do we translate the gospel through our life experiences, our relationships, through scripture, through the spirit. Like, how do we remission in a way where we can figure out how our church has maybe lost the plot and we're trying to get back into the story again? Um, and I think ultimately, maybe what really separates a remissioning church from a revitalizing church is that remissioning leaders are usually recognizing that the church itself bears some of the responsibility to actually disciple people to become Jesus followers who go to our neighbors before we ask our neighbors to come to us. And
Mm,
so, usually a remissioning church is saying, all right, where's the Spirit already gone ahead? How do we catch up? And how do we kind of change the kinds of disciples we make who go rather than asking people to come to them first? So, revitalization is really good, especially if a church has already been doing meaningful, good work. But we know a lot of churches, in fact, the majority of churches in the US and many in the UK are actually a lot more stuck than they are living on mission. And so remissioning is actually saying, how do we look at the whole of our system and think about what it means to update that work?
excellent. Wow. So, Josh, if someone's listening now and they conclude or maybe preclude, well, we're already in a process of revisioning. I've already done some new things last year. Do I jump in and think about remissioning? Is that too much? You've shared why that's possible because of how different it is. But what I want to ask is about the leadership transformation for just a moment, because you've said something I've not heard in explanations of revitalization and revisioning, and that is it's a change of heart in the pastor and the leaders as well. Can you comment perhaps what that looks like, which may give a little peace to those who say, "Hey, I've already done a lot of changes. It hadn't worked. I hate to do something else." This this is this is very organic sounding, like it's a change in the leadership as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes we've probably all experienced leadership that hasn't always hit the mark. Sometimes we've experienced poor leaders in our life who kind of just come into a situation, say, you just need to kind of do what I say and then get on board with it or get out. But a remissioning leader recognizes that they themselves have to experience the same kind of interior transformation in their own leadership, in their walk with God, in their relationship with neighbor, as the church itself. And so, if the leader isn't willing to say, "Oh, well, like where are the places in my life where I've missed the mark of what God has invited me to do as a leader and a pastor,"
Mm,
um, if the leader themselves aren't experiencing that kind of depth of transformation in their own lives, you can't expect the church to go with you because they're not going to trust you because you're asking them to do something that you yourself are unwilling to do. And so, one of the reasons why the Remissioning Church book starts looking at the life of the leader is because it's absolutely essential for us as leaders to ask ourselves, what are the things within me that God has to still do work in so that I can both experience God's goodness in my life as we're going through change and there's conflict and people are disagreeing without actually becoming the kind of monster that pushes people away and just blames everyone else and says, well, if you don't do what I say, then you're not listening to God. Those kinds of leaders are really destructive to a church and a community.
yeah, wow. So this is what you mean by inside outside growth. This is
Yeah.
transformational from every seat of leadership,
Yes,
even if there's only one seat of leadership.
that's right.
Uh, if transformation can happen in that seat, there can be a remissioning dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best kind of remissioning isn't just one person, like the leader by themselves. It's actually saying, how do I, as a leader, in the context of my community, experience a depth of transformation so that we can go somewhere together?
That's good. That's Josh. That is so good. What would you say? I don't really want to really pin you down to one answer, but if you had to give one answer, what is the goal of remissioning?
Yeah,
We have
the goal of
ready to take notes. So hey, where does this land?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Maybe I should have put this on a PowerPoint or something. But the
Good.
way I think about the goal of remissioning is that it's to make disciples who are asking what kinds of relationships, and programs, events, and shared ways of being good neighbors are
Hmm.
necessary for God's kingdom to flourish and transform our community. If a church is thriving and the community in which that church exists is struggling, can you actually say that the church is thriving?
Hmm.
My hope is that a remissioning church will break the cycle of saying, well, that's not how we do things here. And instead say, as we imitate Jesus together, what does it mean for us to love our neighbors? What does it look like? I think many established churches have often gotten stuck when we think about if the goal of remissioning is to transform churches from the inside out. I think many established churches have exported the mission of God that is meant for each of us to some really incredible organizations that do great work around the world. But what's happened is that if you ask a lot of folks in a congregation if they could identify the one person in their life that they're discipling in the way of Jesus,
Mm,
most folks actually can't name anyone.
mm,
Most folks aren't able to say, "Oh, this is the one person. This is the group of five that I spent a lot of time with, discerning what it mean to imitate Jesus and love God, love neighbor."
mm,
My hope is that, and as more churches take the remissioning process seriously, is that we will disciple people inside of our church to live on mission in the neighborhoods, the places of work, in their businesses, in government, on the basketball court, anywhere else they go, kids and drama and theater. My youngest is on cross country, and instead of asking other people to do the work, churches actually grow the kinds of disciples that invite others to consider Jesus as Lord. Like we learn to do this ourselves instead of saying, "Oh, well, I give money to this organization and they do it for me." What does it look like for us to grow the kinds of disciples in the church that live on mission with their own lives?
mm. That's powerful, Josh. And I think a lot of us listening will say that that really sounds like the New Testament church. That's what we should be doing, impacting our
Yeah.
community. I love your question. What would be different about our community if our church didn't exist? And so it is about the internal transformation, is what I'm hearing, that has an external implication or impact. And that discipleship process, Josh, you're championing here, that's at the core of what remissioning does. It creates this larger community of discipleship instead of someone saying, Josh is really good at building relationships, so we're going to pray for him as he does that, but it's empowering others to do that. I see that happening in Ashland. Can you just
Yeah.
maybe give a win story? Do you have a win story, like when you as pastor saw, hey, this is happening? People are going outside the walls to say, hey, we're going to be something organic and not something organized.
Yeah. So one of the things that's become really important in our context is that we aren't living on mission for our community or to our community. We're actually living on mission with our community. And so just last week, we threw a block party. Our church just happens to have a little bit more, a big field with lots of parking that makes it easy for us to host gatherings. And we've realized that one of the things we can do is help convene groups of people. But we actually partnered with over 30 different organizations to throw a block party together. Like we threw a block party together. And it was some different churches, nonprofits, um, a karate dojo, soccer club.
Incredible.
Um, let's see. Yeah, government agencies. Like we threw a block party together because we really felt like in this current climate, it's much easier for us to see how we don't like each other, disagree with each other, are divided from one another, and don't listen to each other. And so we worked really hard to convene a space where we could be neighbors with each other, have some fun. In our neighborhood, we have Kona Ice, which is basically like a glorified snow cone. Um, but we invited food trucks from our neighborhood, and we created a space together where we could be neighbors, listen to music, have fun, because we realize that when we can sew a different thread into the fabric of our community with each other, instead of being identified by how different we are, we can actually look for some of those commonalities about what it means to be uh, made in the image of God with each other. And so for me, that was like a huge thing. Like in a town where it's often easy to identify each other through political parties or differences around race and culture. While those differences are very real and should not be minimized, we need to listen to each other, honor each other. In the block party, we reminded that there is still this like element of being human where we could be with each other. And those conversations about our differences can happen in a different way when they are rooted in a togetherness and sense of our neighborhoods can't flourish without each other.
Josh, that's powerful. Thank you for that. I love the statement, not on mission for our community, but with our community. That's invaluable. Thank you for that. You speak in Remissioning Church about a lot of competencies, core competencies that we need to develop, perhaps disciplines. But I love the phrase core competencies, and there's one that catches my mind a lot: traditioned innovation. I love that because I don't know of a place I've pastored where I haven't had to look at the traditional, this is the way it's been, and try to navigate without disseminating too many church members when you go to a new place like remissioning can take us. So can you comment a little bit about tradition innovation, where this thought has come from, what it's meant to you personally?
Yeah. Traditioned innovation is, and it's an interesting way to think about how change happens in our community. And your spell checker in Microsoft Word will never like this phrase because it doesn't understand how you can add ed onto the word tradition. But the idea is that no change should happen without paying attention to the context, the people, the stories, the places in which a community is rooted. We don't navigate change devoid of people's stories. In fact, that would actually be a, a really harmful way to love your neighbor and to love your church if you just ignore some of the things that helped it to become who it is by the time you got there. You know, my church is over 165 years old. It would have been very rude for me to not learn its stories, its people, its places. So tradition innovation is asking how do we navigate change, realizing the gospel always requires us to translate while honoring our tradition. And so one of the core questions in this competency is really like, how do we honor the past without worshiping it?
Hmm.
Um, Paying attention to the past is incredibly important, but we need to be careful not to elevate it so much that we can't see a future. There's a great do you remember the comic strip Peanuts?
Oh, yes.
Charlie Brown. There's a great Peanuts comic that had stuck out to me for a long time. Basically, for a number of seasons, Charlie Brown and Lucy's baseball team, they haven't won a game. But for some reason, the new season begins. There's hope. The team's like, all right, this is the year. It's going to happen. Charlie Brown throws out the first pitch. Lucy's in the outfield, ready to catch the fly ball. And when it comes down, she's got her glove up. It comes down and down and down. She misses, the ball misses her glove, hits her in the face. And in the comic strip, she brings the ball back to Charlie Brown. And when she says, "Hey, I'm sorry I missed that easy fly ball, manager. The past got in my eyes.
Hmm.
The past got in my eyes." All the time, the failure and struggle made it difficult for her to be present in that moment. You know, churches, people, we're not blank slates. We're rooted in a context, a community, a people, a place. And so tradition innovation is saying, how do we tend to our faith and continue to translate the good news in a way that our neighbors can understand it, in a way that also honors culture, language, hopes, dreams, fears? Because remissioning isn't like, how do we just change things for change's sake? It is a change that honors a story while also being committed to translating the good news with our practices to live on mission with God. There's a there's a Yale theologian, Yaroslav Pelikan. He has this great quote. He says that traditionalism is the dead faith of the living. Tradition is the living faith of the dead. And when I think about tradition innovation, it's saying we do want to pass on something that is the living faith of the dead from our ancestors, from the saints that have gone before us, the peoples whose shoulders we're standing on. But we need to be mindful that we're not just passing them on in a way that keeps it stuck in the past. We actually need to translate that tradition in a way that honors, remembers really well, but recognizes that God is still doing work in the future.
Oh, that's powerful, Josh. Thank you for that. That is powerful. We have about maybe 8 more minutes before we start taking questions from our participants. So participants, be ready with your questions. If you've already sent those in, thank you. If not, feel free to do that. Josh, on this, just one quick question about the present competency. Then I'd like to move to this this idea of creative destruction. That's an amazing perspective. But it just occurred to me when you were speaking that obviously the tradition innovation involves me understanding the story of my congregation, but also the story of the context of my congregation. Like I'm sure
Yes.
you had to invest in the story of your city, Ashland, as much as
Yeah.
investing in the story of the church. Can you just comment on what that's like? Obviously, those two stories likely cross over a bit, but um,
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
is that are we reading that correctly?
Absolutely. It is as essential to learn the stories of the people within your church as it is to learn the stories of the people within your community. Um, the way that I actually learned some of the stories in my community the most was actually through doing funerals.
Mm.
So as I did funerals of people within my church's family that maybe didn't go to our church but lived in or around our community. Um, I have a series of questions that I ask people, like, if this person had one day off to do anything they wanted, what would they do? If they uh, what kinds of books did they like to read or music did they like to listen to? What made them laugh? And it's incredible the kinds of stories you hear about people's hopes, their dreams, failure, stories that haunt them. You learn so much about your community and the way that they perceive what it's like to be a good citizen of that community by asking good questions and kind of listening really well. And so it was amazing to me by spending time with families and learning the stories of people within my community, um, that all of a sudden I realized, oh, here are some places where there's gaps between where my church is living on mission or is understanding good news, and some of my neighbors who are saying, oh, this is the thing I'm actually scared about. And so I learned what some of the like core traditions were that we needed to wrestle with, and so yeah, I don't. Obviously, you can't control when people pass away, but it is one of those things that when you take the time to kind of exegete the neighborhood, ask good questions, learn well about what it means to be a people in that place,
Mm.
uh, you can be more faithful to navigate change without kind of obliterating, ignoring, or conveniently forgetting parts of the story that the neighborhood knows that maybe you don't know as a church or you've forgotten or don't pay attention to. Yeah.
And this is a lot of what we see unfolded in your book, and this is what you're teaching in your coaching sessions and in your consultations, how to make certain that the context inside and outside is uh, is held with respect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so. Josh, that is so good.
Yeah, I mean, when a pastor doesn't love the community that they're serving in, the community knows it. I mean,
Mm.
yeah, you need to be a pastor needs to attend school board meetings, not just deacon meetings at the church. It needs to do both of those things, and the church has to figure out how to pay attention together for those kind
Mm.
of like leadership experiences. When we're not hearing the cries or the stories or the traditions that our community holds sacred and important, we actually can't translate the good news in a way that our neighbors can understand it. And so our neighbors have traditions just like we have traditions. Sometimes they're very clear and connected, and other times we have a lot of hard work to do to figure out how we're missing each other.
That's powerful. Wow. Attend a school board meeting, not just a deacon meeting. That's powerful. Now, there are probably church leaders listening now that will say, "This sounds incredible. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to work through some things in my present ministry to start this remissioning movement or start this remissioning step of competencies." You mentioned creative destruction. Um, None of us like the idea that something's destructive, but the way you approach it, I think, is really masterful. Can you comment on that unique perspective of remissioning?
Yeah, maybe this is a helpful way to get some more chat in the Q&A here, but the idea of creative destruction is how do we embrace the cross as a pathway to resurrection
Mm.
together?
Mm.
Like how do the group of people experience the cross with each other on a pathway to resurrection? I think one of the easiest ways to think about creative destruction is you can put your answer in the Q&A if you want. Um, what is the first way that you remember listening to music? Like the first medium through which you listen to music?
Wow.
Uh, if you think about the ways we've consumed music over the years, like in my lifetime, I remember my earliest was vinyl. Vinyl and radio were like the first two. We had an 8-track player in the house, but we didn't have 8 tracks, so it was in there, but we didn't use it. And then it went cassettes, compact discs. I can remember my first MP3 player. It held 6 songs, 6 whole songs. So if I went for longer than a 27-minute run, it usually didn't have enough songs on there to go for it. And now, most of us just listen to music through streaming.
Yeah.
Every decade or so, music has become more mobile, and like other kinds of media, like music is owned less and less, and we just access it digitally. In most instances, like one form of media was destroyed or fundamentally disrupted so
Mm.
that the new thing could come up. So, like, we don't, how many cassette companies were thrilled when CDs arrived on the scene? Probably none of them. Joseph Schumpeter, who coined the phrase in a book about global markets and change, he describes creative destruction as something that is unintentional and happens to you. Like a cassette company has CDs happen to them, but in an industry market or field of work, something is destroyed and then something new comes after it. But for us as followers of Jesus, it's actually inherent in our story when Jesus tells us that if anyone wants to become my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. The premise of creative destruction is that resurrection happens after death. It might be the death of a program, death of one way of being church. Creative destruction is an active dying so that something new can emerge. It's recognizing that anytime you're going to make some progress, some parts of the way that you live your faith out together has to change. Some portions of it have to die. And I think one of the root issues, one of the reasons why many churches get stuck is that we've actually left out the taking up our cross and following Jesus part of the way that we disciple people and share the gospel. We
Mm.
want to like constantly add, like we're just going to add things. We can keep adding and adding and adding, and we never have to prune. We never have to repent and say, I'm sorry. We never have to turn away from things that we've always done, but haven't actually yielded the fruit that we hoped they would. And so creative destruction is a really essential part of the remissioning process, um, because honestly, so many people get stuck in their own discipleship journeys when they aren't willing to seriously consider what it means to embrace the cross as a pathway to new life. Um, One of the ways that, if it's okay, maybe I'll share a story that kind of highlights how this happens.
Please.
Um, I think about when our church was, we had two different worship services, a traditional service and contemporary service. Uh, and we sort of stopped having two services based on style preferences to literally meet in the middle. We changed the time of our discipleship hour, the time of our worship services. We took some elements from both and in this new service, and then we did things we'd never done before. And there was this really wonderful woman who, after the church had decided to stick with it, stay with this new way of kind of worshiping together going forward, because we baptized a ton of folks, had a number of new members join in this kind of experiment together. And she called me. She was really kind. She was like really wonderful. It was like, hey, this is like so helpful. I see that this has been good for the church, but it's been really hard for me. And I'm
Mm.
not sure that I can sort of stay in this like new form of worship. And she had been a classically trained singer, so some of it was like some style preferences around songs. I said, hey, would you tell me a little bit more about this? And she said, well, to be honest, Josh, like the thing that's so hard is that my husband's died, my daughter got divorced, and so my daughter and granddaughter had to move in with me. And it's been so difficult. And I really love that I could just show up to church, into worship, and I knew what to expect. It was predictable. It helped me to just feel comfort. And when everything else in my life was like struggling and out of control, this was constant and consistent. And I said to her, I was like, oh my goodness, thank you so much for sharing. Like that took a lot of courage. And I said, I'm so sorry because we failed you as a church. And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, we failed you because instead of helping you to grow the muscles that you would need to navigate the hard parts of your life, the changes that were inevitably going to come, instead of helping you to grow the muscles to navigate that in the everyday parts of your life, we actually like fooled you into thinking that the goal of life is just to keep things the same. Life
Mm.
doesn't stay like this. So instead of giving you skills to navigate grief and loss and difficulties, bearing some of who you've been in order to become who God needs you to be next. We actually didn't disciple you very well, and I'm so sorry for that. The beauty of that conversation is that um, even when she ended up dating someone at another church and leaving, like the way that she talked about our staff and our church and the way that we navigated change processes, she's like, "Oh, I didn't always like everything we did, but it was done with intentional like purpose, and I could see why it was good for me and for the church." And so when we talk about creative destruction, again, the goal isn't to say, for a leader, I'm just trying to get my way here. I'm just going to change things. The goal is to say, what is it that needs to die so that new life is possible? Because the truth is, we are all human beings with the same amount of time, and you can't do everything over and over and over again. And so I realize that this part of the story often kind of scares people a little bit, but this is the invitation from Jesus. It's to take up our cross in order to find new life. And
Mm.
so, yeah, that's a little bit of creative destruction.
Josh, there was courage in your parishioners bringing something like that too, but there was courage for you to let down the guard of change for just a moment and to say, "Hey, can you tell me why this is an experience for you?" I think that's an excellent lesson for all of us as pastors, is to
Mhm.
not to be taken affront if
Yeah,
something says, "I'm not sure I can do this."
yeah,
You were very clear to say, "Can you know? Can I ask you why? I want to learn from you to better understand." And Josh, I think that's just an exceptional sidebar for us to note that it has to be this type of conversation and not a this way or the highway. But we have to understand where people are, even though that destruction, and I suppose the destruction is kind of an inevitability in many parts, and that's kind of what you're meaning by the 8 track to the cassette to the. There's going to be some inevitable changes, and if we try to build an ancillary type of experience, it may not be successful. That's what you're saying.
yeah. It's not how do we end these programs or events or
Yeah.
some ways of being church just because I don't like it or it's my preference or I just want to disrupt things because I'm like a bull in a china shop. It's saying if the goal of remissioning is to create the kind of disciples inside of our church that live on mission with God, we should regularly be asking, do the things that we plan, do how we spend our money, our programs, events, are we making the kinds of disciples that see flourishing in the neighborhood? And if not, what is it that needs to stop happening so that new life is possible? And and if we can't model this within the church, we cannot be surprised when our neighbors see us as stuck. And
Yeah.
we can't, and because it's an inherent part of our faith story, life, death, and resurrection, right? If we can't practice this as disciples, we can't be surprised when our neighbors aren't sure how to kind of walk the journey with us because they're experiencing change like this all the time.
Mm. Wow. Josh, that is phenomenal. Thank you for that. That is powerful. I personally deeply appreciate how you've just explained this creative destruction. That's powerful. Josh, thank you for this. I could do this for another hour because this is such an intriguing journey, but we're going to have to invite people to submit questions because this is a big part of what we want to do today. We want to create some conversation. We have a few questions already. So participants be thinking of questions on any point Josh has made or any points not brought up yet that we may need to look at. So, Josh, again, thank you for this conversation you and I have had, and we now want to invite others in. So, we have some questions that are coming up, and let me, Josh, do you want to take that first question? Um, how
Yeah,
how is a remissioning approach different for a struggling or even a dying church compared to a church that may be fairly healthy?
yeah, that's a great question. It kind of connects to Abby's question about how do I know if my church needs to remission. So, um, I'm not trying to just sell the book, but I think, and you can actually get this chart for free on InterVarsity's website if you want. But in the book, I kind of talk about four different remissioning pathways, and um, being able to identify where your church is at in the life cycle is one of the most critical pieces of the journey. Um, you would maybe you wouldn't be surprised. I was surprised when I was first starting to do this work outside of my own context and with other churches. Um, how often the leader and the church itself doesn't necessarily agree on where it's at in the life cycle.
Mm.
Um, And for many churches, the aim of the remissioning journey or church life is just to figure out how do they get to the top of that bell curve and get to a place of stability. But in remissioning, I'm actually asking how do we regularly experience the cross as a pathway to new life? So, a really healthy church to me that isn't in decline or dropout or heading towards death, to kind of get at Wynn's question here, a church that's healthy, um, instead of setting its aims on how do we get to stability where we don't have to change anymore, we can kind of coast. Stability is usually the beginning of the decline process.
Hmm. Hmm.
Instead of seeing that as the goal, what does it look like for a church to make the kinds of disciples that are regularly asking before they get to a point of crisis? How do we intentionally embrace the cross? How do we intentionally honor and guard and protect what tradition needs to be held on to and willingly die to some version of ourselves so that new life is possible? They don't wait until it's bad. So actually, if I were to like have a Wizard of Oz moment here to answer Wynn's question, my hope is that more churches who enter into remissioning journeys that will have a sort of a movement of remissioning churches that aren't waiting until things are in dire straits and really difficult, heading towards death, that will actually begin to have remissioning churches that disciple people so intentionally that they embrace the change process, the death and resurrection process way, way early while they're healthy, while they're growing, while they're financially stable, so that churches um, we will start to break that kind of generational cycle of this is how we've always done it here, instead of saying, what does it look like for us to make disciples who love their neighbors with all they have? Um, Another way to kind of identify if your church needs remissioning, perhaps it's really easy for folks to identify if they're starting to struggle. The mission starts to become unclear. You see some decline just in programs, activities. People are like not connecting to some of the everyday parts of church life. Then you start to see it in dropout, right? Dropout isn't just people leaving the church. Dropout is often people being unwilling to lead within your church. That's actually when you're starting to head into a significant danger zone. It's not when leaders are unwilling to lead, that is usually an indicator that a remissioning process needs to start up very significantly because to replace and multiply apprentices and leaders, that takes years, not days.
Hmm.
And so, a major indicator of the need to remission isn't just, oh, well, we've been declining in numbers. It's when you have either the same people doing all the leadership and no new voices, or people are starting to say, I just don't want to give my time to this. Um, Another way that's just easy to identify on the remission journey is that if you're on a steady decline of financial resources, and perhaps most importantly, is if you are seeing the quality of disciples, if your church is a liability in your community, not an asset.
Hmm.
Um, when I help pastors who are thinking about interviewing at a church, and I did this at the church I interviewed, I didn't just interview with the pastor search committee. I went to various businesses and nonprofits, and I interviewed them about the church. I took the time to listen and I tried to figure out, does the church talk about itself the same way its neighbors do? And so one of the indicators for remissioning is also if you listen well to your neighbors and your neighbors are like, oh, this church is like this. Like they only show up when it benefits them. They only volunteer if it's going to mean people come to their church. If your church sees you as a liability or a leech, you've got a remissioning journey that needs to be embarked upon.
Wow. Josh, thank you for that. Wynn and Abby, thank you for those questions. Josh, thank you for that response. I may circle back to a sub question, but I want to get to some of our other participants as well.
Sure.
That's an intriguing point. How do I know when my church is ready to enter a remission process? Derek asked the question. My good friend and breed evangelist, Jay John, uses the phrase, build a bridge of trust that bears the weight of truth. Is
Yeah.
a remissioning church a building bridges church? Thank you, Derek.
Yeah, Derek, I probably wish I had that quote before I wrote my book. So that's great. That's a fantastic quote. Yeah, spot on. Remissioning churches, depending on how much of a liability they've been in their community, if they've really burned some of those relationships earlier, A remissioning church is a building bridges church. Um, Hopefully over time. There's like two really important truths here. One is when I think about bridge building, the thing about a church that acts as a bridge between sort of differing or previously disconnected communities is that bridges are great because they help bring connection, but it also means you get walked on by people from both sides. And so the bridge building is a cross-shaped journey. Um, I would say the like maturity process for a church that's a bridge building church is actually not doing this on its own, but thinking about how it's building bridges with its neighbors and with other churches. Now, obviously, you can't control if other churches do this, but a way that we often do this in our own community is that if a church comes to us that's been struggling and they're like, hey, would you consider running this at your church, a furniture bank or something like that? We'll say, oh, that is a really great idea. We can see how our community could really benefit from this. But however, like rather than us running it, what does it look like for us to come alongside of you? We'll help you think about strategically how to get there. We'll even provide some volunteers for a season. And then it's your thing. It's the way that you live on mission. It's the way you are the hand of the body of Christ in this community. We'll stick with being the armpit, like you do your thing. And so I do think that churches that are regularly building bridges are asking, what does it look like for us to kind of convene and help previously disconnected people be connected with each other? Yeah, so it's a great quote.
Wow, thank you, Josh. And Derek, thank you for that. That is a great quote. I'm going to bank that one as well. Josh, thank you for
Yeah.
that. It's excellent. Brian asked, thank you, Brian, for this question. Do you foresee this process can work for churches that are in a transition between pastors?
Oh, I love this question from Brian. I think that one of the reasons why it's so difficult for churches to find pastors anymore isn't just because there's a shortage coming through seminaries and people being called into ministry. I think it's because many churches don't do the necessary internal work on themselves to be a healthy place, or at least in a reflective place for a pastor to join them in the mission of God. And so when a church that is in transition can start to think about some of these competencies and have them be kind of a regular part of their lives and start to get some clarity, like what traditions are absolutely essential to us? Like, what do we want to make sure we guard and protect as part of our core DNA? We've translated this way of living on mission with God for years through these traditions. Or hey, we've actually done some work. This way of living on mission, we thought it was it, but it stopped working 5 years ago. And a church that has done some of that legwork so that the pastor doesn't have to come in and be the only person thinking about that. Oh my gosh. Like it would be so much easier to place pastors in those spaces because it could trust the church is as committed to the remissioning process, to being the church with their neighbors, rather than just how do we get somebody who, most of the churches I interviewed with, when I was 12, as you said, Ken, when I got this job 10 years ago, but when I was a younger person, before the gray hair came, they mostly just thought that, okay, we'll get a young pastor. There'll be like a pulpit. They'll get in the pulpit and they're like a trophy we have on our shelf that just sort of like young families will magically show up if we get a young pastor. But what Brian is naming here is that when churches do this like internal work, they actually can become a healthier place for a pastor to land. So I would love to see a movement of transition, churches in transition, learn some of these core competencies together.
Wow, that's powerful. That's so good, Brian. Thank you for that question, and Josh, that is excellent. So we're going to do one more question from Tracy, and then we'll have a few concluding comments. Let me say, Josh, this has been amazing. The questions coming in, we can't get to all the questions. I apologize, but we want to do one more question as we're obedient to our time schedule. So this is from Tracy, a Leland student, by the way. Tracy writes, you just answered my question about how to disciple church members stuck in traditional ways and habits, clinging to their legacy. You're reminding us to do what Christ called us to do, specifically love and listen. This takes a lot of effort, of course. How can we encourage and strengthen one another to pursue the task of loving and listening. I hope this makes sense.
Yeah, Tracy, first off, go Leland. Glad you're there. Second, I think one of the most helpful ways to sort of help our church members to be a part of the change process together, the remissioning process with each other, is what I call like exegeting the church in the neighborhood. So the way we do this is we actually have a chart. So when I got to my context in Ashland, um, I spent a lot of time asking like hopes, dreams, fears, rituals, places where people like to spend time. I tried to learn the history, the stories. Um, and honestly, having been here 10 years, I'm actually learning a whole new layer of those stories now than when I first got here. Um, the thing that most leaders do that often creates a unnecessary mistake in the remissioning process is that instead of the leader themselves doing all of this lifting with the church, one of the best things you can do is to actually exegete the neighborhood with people from your church. So those same questions that I was asking my church members about what hopes, dreams, fears, rituals, places, language, all those things that like helped give us story and context. I invited them to go with me to have some of those conversations with the superintendent, with the business leader, with a new restaurant owner, folks sitting in a coffee shop, people at other churches. And when we had those kinds of conversations with each other, it wasn't, well, Josh just heard what he wanted to hear when he went to this thing, and then he brought it back, and he's just trying to convince us this is the thing to do. They became the holders of those stories. And when we have proximity and presence with each other, and especially with our neighbors, it makes it a lot harder to hate people when you're close up.
Mm.
And so it gives us a lot more room to listen, to encourage, and all of a sudden the church became advocates for its own neighbors rather than me having to ask. Usually now, I'm just like, hey, can you like slow down a little bit so the rest of us can catch up? Like there's so much sense of adventure on what it means to love our neighbors that sometimes we're like, hey, you're running so quickly that the rest of the church can't keep up with you. And so when people experience that proximity and presence with our neighbors, it makes a huge difference.
Wow. Josh, thank you for that. And thank you for that question. That's a great way to wrap up this moment. But we're not wrapping up remissioning. Remissioning will continue to live on because this is an amazing movement that God is using in the US and the UK and in other places. He's using it here at Leland as we prepare pastors. So first, thank you, participants, and thank you for your questions, those that submitted. But we're thankful for everyone that participated. We're going to be, we have about 7 more minutes. So Josh, here's my question. If I'm trying to discern how to move deeper into this, what could be my next step?
Yeah, great question. So I'm a part of a really amazing organization that I helped co-found a couple of years ago called EVA Collaborative, IWA Collaborative. And EVA birds are amazing because they are ginormous birds. But the thing that they do is they fly really high, sometimes for days, weeks, month, like almost a month at a time. They can fall asleep while they're flying. But what they're doing from that high vantage point is sort of discerning where they want to nest and or find food low to the ground. But then when they do nest, they nest low to the ground and usually in community with birds of other species.
Hmm.
And so the thing that EVA Collaborative does is it helps leaders, churches to think about how to fly high and then live low. How do you see the big picture and then live low on the ground in the context of our community and neighborhood? So there's two really great ways for you to get involved. If you're a leader, it doesn't matter if you're a pastor, lead pastor, associate pastor, youth director, any of these kinds of things. Um, we have two really incredible ways for you to get involved. One is our remissioning collectives. So our remissioning collectives are 25-week journeys where you are in community with pastors from around the United States or the UK. We've got groups around the country, here in the US and also in the UK, where you actually go through Remissioning Church and some of those tools together with two experienced coaches and practitioners who are some of the most amazing people on the planet. We've got specific groups for caucus groups for Black leaders, Latino and Latina leaders. We've got groups for um, We have folks in these groups of multiple different denominations, seminary backgrounds, all of that kind of stuff. It is a joy. And those start in September. And so you've got a couple of weeks if you're interested in that. They get to do an intensive in Kansas City where one of our coaches is rooted in, and you'll get to have an immersion experience that's profound. The thing that I'm super excited that we're sort of announcing and launching right now is our partnership with Leland Seminary. And so Leland, in my experience, is one of the most thoughtful, intentionally immersive seminaries that I've ever been around, where they are trying to help form and shape and equip leaders to do real meaningful work on the ground. And so we realize that some leaders, just based on they've already gone to seminary, they're not necessarily looking for a longer program. So we offer an executive certificate, which is a kind of fast and furious experience with Remissioning Church. And so actually starting at the kind of midpoint of October, October 16th and 17th, we're going to have our first ever Remissioning Church executive certificate with Leland Seminary. And we are thrilled for this. We'll start with a 2-day intensive together, and then you're going to have 8 weeks of online coaching with me. And at the end of that process, you'll actually draw up basically what we call a roadmap. You're going to draw up a roadmap for the next 6 months to 3 years, depending on how far in the future you can look. And that roadmap is something that you can share with your leaders and your church using these remissioning competencies and tools to navigate and find your way into the future. I couldn't be more excited to partner with Leland. Leland is just, especially with Ken's leadership and the rest of the faculty and staff, are just really trying to figure out how do we equip real pastors, real leaders for the work that they have. And so we're thrilled to offer that executive certificate starting this fall.
Josh, that's exciting. Both points you've made on how our participants can join you in the next step is very exciting. I'm also very excited about the intensive here at Leland. And so if anyone's interested in that executive certificate, I think we can provide a link. I think they can go to the EVI page and get information on that, as well as the Leland website. And so if you go to either place, you'll see evidence of the executive certificate, and we are very glad to welcome you on behalf of Josh into the collaborative, which is amazing, transformative to say the least. Or if you're looking at something really, really more intensive, then we invite you into the executive certificate. I have met individuals who would say, I'm not quite ready for I finished my MDiv. I'm not quite ready for a doctorate. I don't know what to do next. Josh, I really can't think of a better continuing education for pastors in an intensive format than getting into the executive certificate. So thank you for joining us as one of our adjunct professors. Thank you for allowing us to be in this space with you. I'm very excited. Not only about the executive certificate, but about the collaborative. Participants, please note, this may feel fresh to you if you've not read the book, or if you've just read the book. This may feel new and fresh. Josh has been doing this a while. He gives us information that has been tested. It has been field tested, and pastors are being transformed and churches are being changed. And I'm glad that we can join that journey with you, Josh, by virtue of this webinar. So Josh, thank you for being here. Before we conclude, I would like to make a special recognition. We ask our participants to tell us about their length of ministry and their present position. Now, we have some impressive tenures of 45 years, but we've asked, hey, in this one position, how long have you been here? And there's someone who's been in his one position for 38 years, and that is Bart Pruitt. So Bart, thank you. I believe Bart's church is Virginia Hills. Bart, I hope I've got that right. I've been to Bart's church. And so that is amazing. So Bart, you will receive a free copy of Josh's book, Remissioning, from Leland Seminary. So we'll be getting that to you real soon. Participants, thank you for being here. Let's start this journey together. Let's remission together and see what God will do for his kingdom. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. Josh, thank you for your continued work. And we look forward to exciting days ahead for our pastors and churches as they step into the commitment to remission. And participants know that Leland cares about you and your church. We will continue to create spaces like this for conversation because we truly want to be the seminary for the church. We want to be here for you. Josh, thank you for making today happen. God bless you.
Thanks so much, Ken. Enjoy to be with you.
Participants, thank you. Let's stay in touch with Josh and Remissioning. You've got some links you can follow. Let's step forward in this great space to see our churches continue to be what God has them to be. God bless. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you on our next webinar. Josh, take care.
Thank you.
Have a blessed day, everyone.